The nanny protects Millionaire's son from cruel stepmother, and he's shocked by what he sees. The door slammed shut, the sound of metal locking echoing like a verdict. In the damp basement, darkness swallowed everything except for a faint whimper. Daniel, just 4 years old, sat huddled on the cold stone floor, his small hands clutching tightly to his wooden crutches. They trembled along with his shallow breaths. "It was only a broken glass," Daniel whispered, his voice trembling in the dark. His tear-filled eyes searched for a crack of light through the door, but there was nothing, only emptiness. Upstairs, the vast Hale mansion sank into an eerie silence. Sophia Hale, tall and perfectly groomed with golden hair, walked away from the hallway with a cold expression. To her, the child's cries were nothing more than noise to be silenced. In the grand kitchen, Elena Morales, a 39-year-old widow, set her worn cloth bag on a wooden chair. Her breathing was still uneven after the long trip. The bus ride had taken nearly 5 hours, carrying her far from home, far from her teenage children. She came here with hope, a steady job, wages enough to pay debts and send money back to Lucas and Camilla. But from the very first moment her feet touched the floor of this massive stone mansion, Elena felt something was wrong. Too quiet, too perfect, as if the walls themselves were hiding secrets. Sophia Hale was the first to greet her. Tall, elegant, her gaze sharp with disdain. She wore pristine white linen, her heels clicking against marble floors. "Ms. Morales, correct?" Sophia asked, her voice clipped. "Yes, ma'am. I'm Elena Morales. In this house, silence and order come first. No noise, no prying, and absolutely no disturbing my husband or his son." Elena nodded. "I understand, ma'am." And then came the faint sound drifting from the basement, a fragile sob, broken like a trapped bird. Elena froze. She looked around. No one else seemed to hear. Or perhaps they chose not to. In that moment, memories rushed back. She saw herself at 12 years old, crouching beneath the kitchen table as her drunken father screamed, his belt leaving purple welts across her skin. Fear from the past, thought buried, rose again within that fragile cry. Footsteps echoed behind her, Sophia's sharp and cutting. "Ms. Morales, go to the staff quarters. Get some rest. Tomorrow will be a long day." Elena quickly nodded, but her heart remained heavy. The sound of crying clung to her like an echo in her chest. Night fell, and the Hale mansion lay beneath a thin mountain fog. Wind howled through tall glass windows, carrying the chill of the highlands. Elena lay on the narrow bed in her ground-floor room, eyes shut, but the sound of those sobs lingered in her mind. Somewhere below, Daniel still sat alone. He held his crutches as if they were truly magical swords, defending him from the darkness and the hidden rats in the corners. Yet fear continued to rise inside him. "I promise I'll be good. I promise I won't make noise again." His trembling voice faded into silence. No answer came. In that silence, an invisible promise was born. Elena knew little yet about this child, but her heart had already stirred. Soon, fate would draw her into Daniel's life. And from that moment on, neither of them would ever be alone in the dark again. The first night in the Hale mansion passed heavily. Elena tossed in bed, half dreaming, haunted by the sound of crying in the dark. When dawn broke and pale light slipped through the curtains, she rose, torn inside. She had come here to work, to provide for her children, not to meddle in the affairs of others. Yet the image of a boy clutching his crutches in the shadows pierced her heart like a knife. Before starting her new day, Elena allowed herself to remember the past. Her husband, Javier Morales, a humble construction worker, had died suddenly in a worksite accident. A steel beam had fallen from scaffolding, crushing him and 2 others. Elena had received the phone call on a stifling October afternoon, and her world collapsed in an instant. Javier left behind nothing but debts. Their small house back home had been threatened with foreclosure by the bank. Elena, a hard-working seamstress, could do little but watch her two teenage children sink into despair. Lucas, only 16, dropped out of school to work at a repair shop. Camilla, 15, retreated into books, her eyes carrying a sadness far too old for her age. Elena knew she couldn't let it continue. When she heard of an opportunity to work as a housekeeper for the wealthy Hale family, with a salary large enough to cover debts, she did not hesitate. 6 months away from her children, living like a shadow in someone else's home, was still better than watching her family fall apart. That afternoon, while Sophia busied herself with phone calls, Elena stepped out to the back garden for air. From there, she could see the pines stretching endlessly, the wind carrying their resinous scent. For a brief moment, she felt peace. Then it came, the faint sound from above, the steady thump of wooden crutches striking hardwood floors, slow and careful. Elena looked up. Behind a window curtain, a small figure appeared. Daniel. The boy stood half-hidden, his dark eyes gazing down with both curiosity and fear. Elena's chest tightened. In that fleeting instant, she understood. The silence in this house was not harmless. It was a veil, hiding fear. She turned away, but unease spread through her heart. From now on, her life and that boy's would be bound together. Fate would not let her ignore him. The next morning, Elena rose before dawn. Years of labor had shaped her rhythm. She had never once overslept a day in over 20 years. The vast kitchen was dim in the pale light of morning, the soft clink of knife against board echoing in the silence that blanketed the mansion. She mopped floors, washed cloths, prepared a simple breakfast of toast and coffee for the family. Though only her first full day of work, Elena already felt the invisible pressure of the house. Everything was too orderly, too spotless, as though a single speck of dust might be treated as a crime. At precisely 7:30, footsteps echoed down the grand staircase. The first steps were brisk, decisive. Surely Mr. Richard Hale, hurrying for his business trip. Elena bowed slightly as he passed through the living room, briefcase in hand, elegant in appearance but distant in his gaze. Then came another sound, entirely different, a soft rhythmic thump, steady, labored. She turned, and her heart clenched. On the staircase, a small boy made his way down, one careful step at a time. His thin hands gripped 2 wooden crutches, each movement a struggle. Every shift of weight seemed to demand all his focus, his face tight with fear of falling. It was Daniel. He wore a pale sweater, far too large for his fragile frame. His face was ghostly pale, his large eyes both sorrowful and wary. When he reached the bottom step, Daniel paused. His gaze met Elena's. They stared at one another in silence. Elena gave him the warmest smile she could. "Good morning," she whispered softly, afraid to shatter the fragile moment. Daniel didn't answer, but he didn't look away either. In his eyes, Elena caught a glimpse of something, an ache for closeness, shadowed by fear. Her chest tightened. "Daniel!" Sophia's voice rang from upstairs, sharp as a blade. The boy flinched, nearly losing his balance. Elena instinctively stepped forward, then froze as Sophia appeared. Dressed in a luxurious robe, her face carried clear irritation. "What are you doing down here? How many times must I say it? You are to stay in your room until I call for you," she scolded, every word striking like stone. Daniel lowered his head, lips trembling. "I'm sorry." Before Elena could speak, Sophia turned on her. "Ms. Morales, continue your work. Do not concern yourself." Sophia gripped Daniel's hand firmly, pulling him toward the dining room. Her eyes flicked coldly at Elena, a silent warning. Elena bent down, resuming her scrubbing, though her heart twisted painfully. The image of Daniel wobbling on his crutches, the lost look in his eyes, replayed endlessly in her mind. She remembered the promise she had made her first night here. She would not let that child remain alone in the dark. That evening, after Sophia retired upstairs, Elena sat in her small staff quarters. The wind howled outside, rattling the tall glass windows. Then she heard it again, the faint dragging steps above, slow and uneven, and beneath them a muffled sob. Elena sat still, her hand pressed against her chest. The child's pain was knocking directly at her heart. In the days that followed, Elena grew accustomed to the rhythm of life in the Hale mansion. Her work stretched from morning to night, scrubbing floors, doing laundry, preparing simple meals. Sophia often left for social gatherings, leaving behind detailed task lists and cold instructions. "You are not to go upstairs when I'm away," Sophia had repeated firmly. But it was on the second floor that Daniel lived, in a room that felt more like a prison than a bedroom. Elena heard the clatter of crutches against hardwood, heard him whisper to himself in soft make-believe voices. Each sound cut into her like a blade. One afternoon, while Sophia was away at a luncheon, Elena carried a small tray of cookies and juice up the stairs. She tapped gently on the closed door. "Daniel, it's Elena. I brought you something to eat." Silence. Then slow, uneven steps. The door creaked open, and wide, dark eyes peered out. You're not allowed to come in," the boy whispered. "I know, but your stepmother isn't here today. I just want to make sure you're not hungry." Daniel hesitated, then opened the door a little wider. Elena stepped in and set the tray on the table. The room was unnervingly neat, arranged like a showroom rather than a child's space. Toys on the shelves were dusty, books stacked far too high for him to reach. "These are cookies I made. Would you like to try?" Daniel's eyes lit up briefly at the sight of the star-shaped cookies. He pulled out a chair and sat, his crutches resting against the wall. "How did you know I like stars?" Elena smiled. "I didn't. I just guessed, because stars shine brightest in the dark." Daniel froze. A shy, tentative smile tugged at his lips. "My real mom used to say that too." His voice wavered, soft. "She said my crutches were magic swords, that when I held them, I was as strong as a knight." Elena's heart tightened. She leaned down, straightening his crutches. "Your mother was wise. Magic swords belong to the brave, and I believe you are a brave little knight." Daniel studied her for a long moment, eyes torn between doubt and longing. "Do you really think so?" "I'm certain." He nodded, then whispered, as if sharing a forbidden secret. "But when I make noise, my stepmother gets mad. She locks me in the dark room in the basement." The confession sent a chill through Elena's spine. "The dark room?" Daniel nodded. "It's small, no light. She says I need to learn silence. I'm so scared." Elena fought back her anger, gently taking his trembling hand. "Daniel, listen to me. No child deserves that. None of this is your fault." Tears welled in his eyes. "But if I tell Dad, she said he'll send me away, to a place where children like me are unwanted." "No, Daniel." Elena's voice was steady. "Your father loves you, and you deserve to be loved." He went quiet, as if weighing whether to believe her. Then he asked, almost pleading, "If someday you have to leave, will you abandon me too?" The question tore at Elena's heart. She blinked back tears, resting a hand on his small shoulder. "I'll be here, Daniel, and whenever you need me, just call, I promise." Daniel reached for a cookie, nibbling in tiny bites, his eyes shining with quiet joy. Elena sat across from him, listening as he shyly described the dragons from an old storybook, his words halting yet vivid with imagination. In that moment, the once cold room seemed to soften, as though sunlight had quietly slipped inside. Elena chuckled when Daniel tried to mimic a dragon's growl. That rare smile on his face lit him up, No longer the child locked away, but a soul set free by gentleness. Then the spell broke. From the distance came the sharp click, click of high heels striking stone. Growing louder, Sophia was back. Elena's chest tightened. She hurriedly gathered the tray, straightened the chair, erasing every trace of the warmth that had just bloomed. Daniel froze, wide-eyed, as if afraid it would all vanish in an instant. Leaning close, Elena whispered, "This stays our secret, all right?" Daniel pressed a finger to his lips, then nodded, his eyes gleaming with innocent complicity. Elena gave his small hand a quick squeeze before slipping out the door. As it closed behind her, Daniel remained inside, a faint smile on his lips, yet within his heart, a fragile seed of hope had already begun to grow. On her second morning in the mansion, Elena woke early as usual. Pale sunlight streamed through the tall glass windows, stretching across the cold stone floors. As she scrubbed, she listened to familiar sounds, distant birds, the hiss of wind through the pines. Then a low voice from the staircase startled her. "You're the new housekeeper?" Elena looked up. Standing before her was Richard Hale, tall, dressed in a suit despite the early hour. He carried the authority of a man used to command, yet his eyes were weary, shadowed with fatigue. "Yes, sir, I'm Elena Morales," she replied politely, bowing her head. Richard nodded briefly, distracted. "Sophia told me. I'll be away on business for several days. If you need anything, speak directly with her." "Yes, sir." He glanced around the living room, then strode off, his mind already consumed by meetings and projects. Elena stood still, her chest heavy. This was Daniel's father, the man who could protect him, yet he seemed blind to what his son endured. At breakfast that morning, Elena overheard Sophia's voice, low and laced with false concern. "You know, Daniel is so difficult to manage. He's stubborn, always making up stories for attention. I'm exhausted." Richard fell silent, his brow faintly furrowed. But instead of probing further, he only sighed. "I know it's hard on you. Try to be patient with him." Elena's stomach burned with anger. Patient? Was that all? He didn't see what Daniel needed, or worse, he believed Sophia's carefully spun lies. That afternoon, while dusting near the hallway, Elena found Daniel perched on a small chair, eyes buried in a book. He glanced up and offered her a faint smile. She moved closer, pretending to wipe the window ledge. "Does your father talk with you often?" she asked softly. Daniel shook his head. "He's busy, always on the phone or in meetings. When he's home, he doesn't want to be disturbed." "Have you ever tried telling him what makes you sad?" The boy lowered his gaze, fingers fiddling with the book's corner. "I'm scared. If I say something, he'll think I'm lying. She said no one will ever believe me." Elena's throat tightened. In his eyes she saw the hunger for trust, yet the despair of a child already silenced. That evening at dinner, Elena noticed Richard sitting quietly, nodding along as Sophia recounted Daniel's so-called mischief. Not once did he ask his son directly. Not once did he study the boy's eyes. Daniel sat opposite, spooning soup in silence. When his spoon accidentally clinked against the bowl, Sophia frowned. "Daniel, how many times have I told you? No noise at the table." Richard glanced briefly, then returned to cutting his meat, saying nothing. Elena saw Daniel tremble, his small hand tightening on the spoon, his eyes glistening with tears he dared not shed. In that moment, Elena understood. Sophia was not the only shadow haunting Daniel's life. His father's silence was another prison, one built not of cruelty, but of blindness. And Elena vowed to herself she would not let this blindness last. Daniel needed someone to believe in him, and if not his father, then at the very least, she would be that someone. That night, Elena phoned her mother-in-law back home. The older woman's voice was worried. "Daughter, focus on your own family. You have 2 children waiting. Don't bring trouble on yourself with the rich." "But Mama—" "This is a child," Elena whispered, choked with emotion. "All children have difficulties. You can't change anything. Don't make your own kids suffer more." Elena fell silent. Her words carried truth, but Elena's heart could not turn away. Every time she remembered Daniel's terrified eyes in the dark, she knew she had stepped into a battle no one had asked of her, yet one her mother's heart could not refuse. The night stretched heavy with doubts, but by morning, Elena's resolve had hardened. Whatever the risk, she could not look away any more. The next day, while cleaning the living room, Elena overheard Sophia on the phone with a friend. "The boy grows more troublesome every day. I've been looking into boarding schools for special children. Soon, I'll convince Richard to send him away." Elena froze, her grip tightening on the mop. Boarding school. That meant tearing Daniel away from this house, away from even the faintest chance of his father's protection. Inside Elena, a fierce resolve flared. She would not allow it. No matter how skillfully Sophia concealed the truth, no matter how blind Richard remained, the darkness of this household had to be brought into the light. That afternoon, a light rain fell, wrapping the Hale mansion in a misty veil. Elena was tidying the kitchen when a loud thud came from upstairs. Something heavy dropped, followed by a small cry of pain. Without thinking, she rushed up. The long hallway echoed with the clatter of crutches against wood. At Daniel's door, she found the boy sitting on the floor, one crutch sprawled beside him. A red mark bloomed across his forehead. "Daniel!" Elena dropped to her knees, steadying him. "Are you hurt?" His wide eyes brimmed with tears. "I just wanted the book. On the high shelf." Elena glanced around. The shelves towered far beyond a 4-year-old's reach. She bit her lip, her chest aching. "You shouldn't climb alone. It's too dangerous." Daniel lowered his head, embarrassed. Then he whispered, "My real mom used to read it to me, about dragons. I miss her." Elena's chest tightened, the boy's longing slicing into her like a blade. She pulled him into her arms, her hands trembling. "It's all right, Daniel. Next time, ask me. I'll read it with you." In that fragile moment, neither of them noticed the cold eyes watching from the end of the hallway. Sophia stood there, arms folded. "What's going on here?" Her voice cut sharp. Elena shot to her feet, heart pounding. "He fell. I was just—" "No need to explain," Sophia interrupted, stepping forward to seize Daniel's hand. "Come, back to your room." The boy flinched, glancing at Elena with frightened eyes. Elena managed to whisper, "It's all right. I'm here." Sophia paused a fraction, suspicion flashing across her face. Then she tightened her grip on Daniel, pulling him inside and slamming the door so hard the hallway shuddered. Elena stood frozen, her chest tight. She knew she had revealed too much, her bond with Daniel, the one thing Sophia wanted to suppress. The secret they had guarded so carefully had begun to crack. That night, when the house fell silent, Elena sat in her small room, her head in her hands. She remembered Sophia's watchful glare, the slam of the door. From now on, every step would carry greater risk. And yet, she also knew, there was no going back. She had touched Daniel's fear, made him a promise. And once a secret begins to crack, sooner or later the light will find its way through. Elena, after days of watching in silence, could hold back no longer. One afternoon, as Richard ended a long phone call in his study, she knocked on the door, her hand trembling. "Mr. Hale, forgive me for intruding, but I need to say this." Richard looked up, frowning slightly. "What is it? Some issue with the work?" "No, sir, it's about Daniel." His brow furrowed deeper, ready to dismiss her, but Elena pressed on. "Have you ever truly listened to your son? Daniel doesn't need more silence. He needs a father. Richard gave a short, awkward laugh. You don't understand. Sophia is very devoted. She's strict, yes, but she loves him. Elena drew a steady breath, summoning her courage. I'm sorry, sir, but I think you've been misled. Daniel is lonely, and that loneliness is consuming him. Richard began to protest, but her unwavering gaze made him pause. He fell quiet for a long moment, then nodded faintly. All right, I'll try. That evening, for the first time in months, Richard entered his son's room. Daniel looked up, startled to see his father at the door. What are you doing? Richard asked, his voice uncertain. I'm reading, Daniel answered softly. Richard sat beside him, forcing a small smile. Would you like to talk for a bit? Daniel studied him, eyes filled with both confusion and fragile hope. After a long silence, his voice trembled as he asked, Dad, why do you never play with me? Do you really love me? The question cut Richard to the core. He froze, struck silent. All the years of busyness, all the excuses of work now stood as unspoken accusations. He pulled his son into his arms, holding him tight, as though afraid to lose him forever. His voice broke. I'm sorry, Daniel. I was wrong. I love you. More than anything. After his talk with Daniel, Richard began to notice more. He observed, he listened, and for the first time he saw the chill in Sophia's voice, the coldness in her eyes when she spoke to his son. There was no gentleness, only commands and needless scolding. Sophia noticed it too. Richard's new watchfulness unsettled her. His eyes followed her every gesture, every harsh word directed at Daniel. One morning, Daniel pleaded, I want to go downstairs to say goodbye to Dad. His eyes shone with hope, yearning for a hug, a farewell. But Sophia seized his thin arm and dragged him back toward the stairs. No, don't bother your father. Daniel burst into tears, his crutches clattering to the floor. With gritted teeth, Sophia pulled him down to the basement. The iron door slammed shut, the turning key echoing like thunder. Elena saw everything from the end of the hall. Her heart shattered. Without hesitation, she called Richard. Mr. Hale, please, come home now. Daniel is in danger. That afternoon, Elena waited at the gate. As soon as the luxury car stopped, she rushed forward, breathless. Follow me, right now. Before Richard could ask, she led him to the basement door. The air was damp and foul, and in the dimness, Daniel huddled in a corner, trembling with fear. My son! Richard cried, rushing to hold him. Daniel sobbed, clinging to him as though clinging to life itself. Elena flicked on the light. Mold-stained walls, a freezing floor, the suffocating space of a cell. Richard's eyes burned red as he held his son tighter. Sophia appeared at the doorway, her face shifting. Richard, let me explain. Explain? His voice thundered. You lock a 4-year-old in this dungeon and call it discipline? Sophia's tone hardened. He's a burden, Richard. He drags down our lives. I've sacrificed too much for a child who isn't even mine. The raw confession froze the air. Richard slowly rose, Daniel still in his arms. His gaze toward Sophia now held only cold fury. I've been blind too long, but today I choose my son. You have no place in this house anymore. You can't do this to me, Sophia shrieked, her voice breaking. I can. My lawyer will send you the divorce papers. Security! 2 guards appeared, seizing Sophia's arms as she kicked and screamed. Her voice shrilled through the corridors, but no one answered it. Dragged out of the mansion, the clatter of her heels echoed down the hall, hollow, bitter, and final. Richard sank onto the sofa in the living room, clutching Daniel to his chest. He stroked his son's hair, his voice trembling. I'm sorry, Daniel. I was blind. I left you to suffer alone for too long. Daniel looked up, tears streaming. "Dad, don't leave me in the dark again." Richard held him tighter, tears of his own falling. "Never again. You are my light, and I'll never let you be lost." In that moment, the mansion's shadows seemed to dissolve, replaced by a fragile but brilliant light. The bond between father and son, finally reclaimed. The Hale household seemed to breathe a new air after the storm. Since Sophia's departure, the heavy weight that had suffocated the home was gone. In its place came laughter, light spilling into corners once filled only with silence and fear. Richard spent more time with Daniel. He postponed business trips, choosing to work from his home office so he could see his son every day. Breakfasts were no longer rushed. Instead, they were filled with simple conversations about last night's dreams, the drawings Daniel had made, or the little story he had just read in a book. One afternoon, as the sunset cast golden light over the garden, Daniel sat on the porch with his father and Elena. He hesitated, then asked softly, "Dad, do I make you sad?" Richard turned, pulling his son close, his voice breaking. "No, Daniel. You have never been a burden. You are the most precious gift I have." Elena smiled, her eyes glistening. Daniel pressed his face against his father's chest, feeling the warmth and steady heartbeat. In that moment, he knew the darkness had truly faded. In the days that followed, Richard took Daniel to a rehabilitation specialist. The doctor confirmed, with the right therapy, the boy's legs could improve greatly. Hearing this, Daniel's entire face lit up. "I'll work hard, Dad. One day I want to run in the garden with you." Richard squeezed the small hand tightly. "And I'll be running right beside you." 6 months had passed. The Hale mansion was no longer filled with sighs and shadows, but with laughter, the patter of small footsteps in the halls, and conversations that stretched joyfully into dinner time. Daniel had changed so much. The constant worry in his eyes was gone, replaced with the innocence he should have had all along. Elena was like a warm flame, and her presence turned the house into a true home. One weekend, Elena's children, Lucas and Camilla, came to visit. At first, Daniel hung back shyly as they entered, but within hours the three were chattering like old friends. Lucas taught Daniel how to build robot puzzles, while Camilla showed him how to make paper chains. In Daniel's eyes, the new joy seemed to light up his whole world. Richard watched from a distance, his heart swelling with emotions he thought he'd lost forever, the image of a real family. One evening, after the children had gone to bed, Richard found Elena in the garden, the warm glow of lantern light falling on her face. He paused, almost to be sure he wasn't dreaming. "Elena," he began softly, "you've given Daniel not just care, but the faith to smile again. And you've given me back a hope I thought had long died." Elena remained quiet, her eyes shimmering. Richard stepped closer, taking her hand. "I want you to stay. Not as a helper, not as a tutor. I want you to be Daniel's mother. And if you'll allow, I want you to be my partner in life." Her voice trembled, tears welling. "Richard, are you sure? I have 2 children of my own. My life is far from perfect." Richard smiled, holding her hand tighter. "That's exactly why we need each other. I'm not searching for perfection. I'm searching for a family. And together, we can build it." Tears of happiness rolled down Elena's cheeks. "Then, yes, I will." The climax of their journey came weeks later, a simple wedding in the garden of the very house that had once held so much pain. No lavish gowns, no grand feasts, just white flowers, sunlight, and the people who truly mattered. Daniel proudly stood as the best man. He walked slowly down the flower-strewn path, his crutches still by his side. But this time, they were no burden. To him, they were magic swords, symbols of the strength and courage he had discovered. Lucas and Camilla tossed petals, laughing, while Richard and Elena held hands and exchanged vows before those they loved. No elaborate words, just a simple promise to love and protect each other as a true family. When the minister declared, "You are now a family," applause erupted, mingling with the laughter of children. Daniel looked at his father and Elena, his eyes shining with pride and peace. That night, after everyone had left, Daniel placed a drawing on the dining table. It was messy but full of meaning, 5 figures holding hands: Richard, Elena, Lucas, Camilla, and himself. Above them, in crooked letters, were the words, "My family." Richard hugged his son tight, tears shimmering. Elena wrapped her arms around them both, and in that moment they knew they had found the most precious treasure of all. For family is not only made of blood. Family is made of those who choose to stay, who choose to love and protect you no matter the storm. And sometimes the strongest families are not inherited, but created by choice. In that home, a new family had truly been born.